I'm Wendelle Stevens, Lieutenant Colonel, United States Air Force, retired. I became interested in the UFO phenomena many years ago when I was a young man in the service. I was a fighter pilot and a test pilot, and the UFOs seemed to be just a quantum jump forward in aviation technology at the time. And it fascinated me because part of my job at the Wright Air Development Center was to screen classified documents captured from former enemy production facilities that were being brought through Wright Field for separation and preparation for distribution to our own manufacturers to try to catch up with any new and innovative developments that other countries might have experienced before they lost the war.
And what newer developments have come across, especially in the 90s?
Well, at the time, there were canard jet fighters on the board, and even some discs on the drawing boards in some countries. They were atmospheric vehicles. They could had to take off and land. The most sophisticated vehicles probably were the rocket vehicles, but they were nothing like the UFO phenomena that was also being reported at the time. Occasionally, we had a lot of people in the air in those days, and they reported such encounters as Foo Fighter encounters. Foo Fighter meaning fireball fighters. They were round glowing balls that would get into formations of military airplanes, stay there for a time, and then leave. They appeared to be intelligently controlled. At the time, I think it was believed that that was the phenomena itself. I think later we came to some kind of a conclusion that the fireballs were controlled by somebody else aboard another larger vehicle elsewhere.
And you talk about UFOs now. A lot of these, not so much alien, but also controlled by, say, government installations and places like that. Do you know anything about that?
Well, we didn't have a capability of controlling these exotic fireballs that could get in formation and stay there without being, couldn't shoot them down. They could evade, they could hang on to a fighter going through evasive maneuvers and stay in position. We had rockets that could be launched through a formation and even missiles, but we didn't have anything that could lock on and stay with another vehicle at the time.
And you talk also about the case of Billy Meier. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, the Billy Meier case in Switzerland was a fascinating case and a fascinating investigation because it involved a great deal of evidence. There was physical evidence of many kinds. It involved many other eyewitnesses. It actually involved 5 other photographers too. Billy Meier took most of the pictures, but pictures were taken by 5 other photographers, at least that we knew of, and which were known to Billy. We found one photographer unknown to Billy who had taken pictures one time. We also found eyewitnesses unknown to Billy that had seen the craft descend into a forest at a point where a contact was made with Billy and then rise and fly away. They never heard of Billy Meier, and he had never heard of them. So these things we were able to put these together by canvassing the neighborhoods and by questioning residents in the area of some of the contacts. What puzzled me a great deal about the pictures was the interception of a number of his pictures. After the second photographic event, he began carrying more film. He would carry 4 or 5 rolls of film in his pocket, and he exposed several rolls on several occasions. Whenever there was several rolls of film exposed, and when they went through processing, he almost invariably lost one that didn't come back. And what he would get was one of these "you goofed" slips that indicated that the camera wasn't adjusted right, the film didn't roll through, or one thing after another, and instead of returning the film, they just sent him a certificate authorizing him to get another roll of film to replace it. We found this very disturbing because it usually was what he thought might have been the best roll. Then he got a package of slides back. Remember, he shot all of his pictures on positive slide film. He got a package of slides back, and when he had the slides printed, everything came out backward. The landscape was reversed, signs read backwards, and everything, and he thought it was a mistake. He took them back and had them printed again, and that printing came back backwards. So at that point, Billy was prepared to believe that the Pleiadians had demonstrated some capability of theirs, remarkable capability that was a trick of the Pleiadians played on him. When we went to the laboratory that processed the film, though, they said that that would be impossible, that the only suggestion they could make is that somebody in their laboratory facility, for some reason or another, made a duplicate strip of film, emulsion to emulsion, which gives you higher fidelity, the best fidelity. And then a mistake was made in returning his. They returned the duplicated slides instead of his originals. The originals went someplace else. So now we don't have any proof, but we have an indication of some tampering being done in the professional laboratories themselves, which they were very concerned about. The laboratory staff didn't know this was going on, so it was being done by lower level people working in the laboratories. That was one time. Another time that was Billy's fault. When he was shooting more than one roll of film, he'd move them from one pocket to the next. The unexposed ones in one pocket, the exposed ones in another. And he got one roll of film back that, to us, clearly were double exposures. To him, he thought he was sure that he hadn't mixed his film, and he thought the Pleiadians had played another trick on him, a visual trick. But when we got some of those back here, we were able to visually separate the images in computers and look at the separate pictures. They were actually double exposures.
Why do you think that? Why do you think someone would do that? Would actually mess with the photos, as you said, in the laboratory?
The laboratories couldn't make anything of this. They couldn't understand because they're under very strict rules and regulations about handling other people's property. And if they could have found in the laboratory, and they conducted serious investigations there to try to find out who could have done it. If they had found out who could, he certainly would have been fired immediately and probably charged with some charge of tampering or something like that. But they couldn't find out where it was done. The only thing we had is the film was turned in properly, the log showed it was logged in, the log showed it was processed, the log showed it was logged back out again, except for the missing rolls. When that happened, it showed that only 2 rolls came out. When 3 rolls were turned in, 2 rolls came out of the developing room. And we never found who got it. A similar thing happened to his 8mm movies. He took 8 sequences of 8mm movies that a television station in Munich wanted to borrow for treatment on his case, and Billy was very trusting. At this time, he trusted everybody. And so he prepared to send his 8 small 8mm rolls to the television station, and one of the people around him says, "No, let's not send it that way. Let's splice them together, put them all on one reel, and we'll mark the reel and the can, so we could tell if we get them back." So they did, and when after the program, they tried to get the film back, the station resisted. It didn't send them, and didn't send them. More inquiries. They had an attorney inquire into it. And finally, the station in Munich sent the film back. They checked the reel, the can, and the reel inside, thought they had the original. It wasn't until months later when we were there with the Japanese video team that Meier had agreed to allow them to shoot the movie film onto video film, and they were going to give Billy a copy of that. After the first sequence, Mr. Yowie called for him to stop the film. He said, "Roll it back, I want to see the splice." So they did, and when we looked at the splice, it was photographed into the film. So now we know that somebody in the Munich station had taken the originals, had that duplicated, and they unrolled the originals from the marked canister and reel, and rolled the duplicates back on the marked reel and put it in the marked canister and returned it. So whoever made off with it was taking all the precautions he could to be sure that his theft would not be immediately discovered. And all of this was going around. Our testing had to be done with the duplicates that were made by the Munich station, because I only saw the originals a couple of times before Meier sent them to to Munich.
Well, it's a lot of. It's interesting in a lot of cases when you, like Billy and people like that who get contacted, they don't see anything but when they look in the viewfinder, they get to see something.
Billy's case was different. He could see it visually, and he also saw it in the viewfinder. But an interesting thing, he finally he began carrying a video camera and a tripod, and he would set the video camera, set the tripod up, and mount the video camera. Not a video camera, I'm sorry, an 8mm movie camera. It was an old key wind 8mm camera, and he'd set the tripod up, put the camera on it, wind it up, and then get his hand camera ready, and then he'd push the start button on the movie camera when the image appeared. And he found that almost invariably he didn't have to move the movie camera. When the image appeared, it always appeared in front of the movie camera. All he had to do is push the button and start shooting pictures with his hand camera. And he asked them one time about that, and they said, of course, we know which direction you set the camera up.
In a lot of cases also, I've noticed that only he will be able to see it, he and the camera. Like there's some instances in Miami and other places.
They told him that they had a way of opening the visibility screen in his direction when they were allowing him to take. Remember now, he couldn't take those pictures until they allowed him to. If they didn't tell him he could bring his cameras, there's no chance of getting a picture. And they would tell him when he could take the pictures because, and there was a reason for it. That's why this pictures are so good. When they allowed him to bring the cameras, they actually posed the ships in a flight demonstration, moving slowly so that he could get good pictures. And they had a motive for that. The motive was they thought that if he could get clear enough and sharp enough pictures, that his own government would become interested in what was going on, would analyze the pictures, would find that it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to fake the pictures. They would come to him and ask him, who are they, where are they from, and what do they want? They had prepared from the very first contact a message to be delivered to his Swiss government. And that message pertained to the decay of our ionosphere and the dangers that we faced if we didn't stop the cause of the decay. And they even told him what the cause of the decay was. And they dictated a message to be transmitted to his government. And after that, after the message was received and transmitted and prepared and delivered to the government, and he didn't question it at the time, another contact after that, when they were back again, Semyasi asked him what the reaction of the Swiss government was. He said, I haven't heard anything. He said, why don't you do it yourself? And she said, we have. She said, we approached one of your sitting presidents. Now, Switzerland has several presidents. They have an elected president from each province, and they sit as a presidential council. So she said, we have approached one of your presidents. We contacted him, asked the same favor of him, and he was a timid soul. He didn't tell his wife. He didn't tell his colleagues. He didn't tell anybody about his contacts because he was afraid of ridicule and disbelief. And so that was completely fruitless.
Yeah, I guess a lot of this is because they're trying to. What the main reason? What would be the main reason that you think that they're coming a lot more now than they used to?
I don't think they're coming a lot more now than they used to. I think that our reporting has improved. I think that it's people are more likely to report a contact now than they would have been 10 years ago. They didn't, when they told the first person about it and get the raised eyebrows and the look away, that usually stops there, because it's usually a close friend, and they know if he's not going to believe it, nobody else is. But now, with so many reports out, their friends don't raise their eyebrows and look away anymore. They get a little more interested, and they get more information, and together they go to somebody else. And I think that's all that's happening, is just an increase in the rate of reporting, not an increase in the rate of activity.
And you talked a little bit about them predicting certain aspects. Can you go into a little bit?
They predicted a number of things. I guess you overheard me talking to somebody downstairs about their prediction of, first of all, describing the murder of Pope Paul VI, which has never been described as a murder. And the following morning, before the conclave is called to elect a new pope, he's telling me about the murder. He tells me how it was done, who did it, who the plotters were, why they were concerned, what was going to happen that was frustrated by the murder. And he told me, and I kept protesting that they don't murder popes. He kept insisting they did this one. And I guess to reinforce his view, he said, and I can tell you, Mr. Stevens, the next pope, his successor, will be elected in the largest conclave in the history of the church. He'll be elected on the shortest vote. It'll be on the third ballot. It'll take 33 minutes to verify the ballot. He will reign 33 days and die by the same number of days, he said, and die by the same hand. And he said he will take, when he's elected, he will take the name John Paul I. Now, this is before the election, and it's before the conclave was even called. And I'm still protesting that we don't murder popes. When he went on to give me some information about the next one, he said he will be elected from outside of the Vatican hierarchy. He'll come from an East Bloc nation, suggested Poland, that he will be kept on the road by the Vatican hierarchy to keep him from discovering the other two deaths and the reason for it, and to give him time to know that he's in danger also if he moves too far too fast. And they kept him on the road as much as they could to run the Vatican without his presence there. That's the present Pope John Paul II. That name was taken in honor of the one that reigned only 33 days. They said that he would be known as the Smiling Pope, which he kind of is, that he would travel the world, and that if he decides to investigate, if he becomes aware of and decides to investigate the previous two murders, that he has to go. And there was also an indication that normal events might take him before that. But when this pope goes, he told me that the next pope after this one will be elected from inside the Vatican hierarchy and will be one of the co-conspirators in the murder of the other two popes. This has never been released before, never been published before. Meier was warned not to discuss any future events at any time until after they had happened. But I think he felt that he had to justify, he had to persuade me to believe what was going on, and I didn't believe it at the time, but I certainly did when the next pope died in 33 days of the same clinical description, heart seizure. And the medicine used, Meier was shown that the medicine used was a chemical, there was one drop of chemical, clear chemical, that was put in the tea that caused a cramp in the heart. Lasts about 10 minutes, and then the chemical evaporates out of the body in the heat of the body, and it's not detectable anymore. The clinical description of the death would have to be a heart seizure. And both popes, according to the Catholic Digest, or the Catholic Encyclopedia, under both popes' names, they died of a heart seizure.
Interesting. In your research, have you gone into ancient cultures and seen how they've looked into ufology as well?
Well, I don't have access to a lot. I would like to study the reports in the Annals of Rome. There's 28 volumes of the Annals of Rome, and flying seals are mentioned in 21 volumes, but I never had an opportunity and a library that had them to do the research that I would like to. There's historical references to Vaimanas in India. So many Vaimanas were seen that they classified them by birds' names. There were stork Vaimanas, pheasant Vaimanas, goose Vaimanas, duck Vaimanas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why do you think it's important for us to get first-hand accounts from people that have had first-hand contact?
Well, if we want to study the problem, the closer to it we can get, the better it is. Second-hand reports are all right. I mean, they help, but they're certainly not as good as first-hand reports.
And have you seen similarities between different accounts?
Oh, yeah. I try to classify them, make tables of similarities and things like that. What I found over a long period of time, after investigating about 100 cases or more in great detail, where the entities kept coming back over and over repeatedly, it began to look like, where was I going with this?
I guess I was into look different types and
it began to look like they were all different. There were differences in origin, differences in the nature of business, differences in the propulsion systems that's used by the spacecraft, communication systems, differences in morphology, appearance. Some of them were even different race and species types altogether. Where they were humans like us, they didn't look exactly like us. They had larger or smaller ears or no ears, bigger or smaller nose or none. Indicating to me that our visitors are almost infinitely different, that the cosmos is vast, and we are off the mainstream of interspace traffic, I believe. Where contactees have been shown maps, we're never on a regular route of traffic in our galaxy, and we're off in the boonies someplace. And that means that we're discovering Earth is kind of a happenstance arrangement. We do have a few that come back, find something of interest here and come back over and over again to following up on that, and sometimes others, contemporaries of theirs, follow up later. But generally speaking, I guess one would have to say that of the 100 cases that I examined, only 2 might have been coming from the same society and the same place in the heavens that we're visiting here. All the rest were different. And if that's the sampling, then we have a vast amount of difference in detail in the phenomena itself.
Well, there's a lot of people that we've interviewed talking about how a lot of aliens are actually living among us as well. Do you know anything about that?
I think that could be possible because some of them look so much like us they can wear our street clothes. Matter of fact, the ones that were visiting Meier told him that they had acquired Earth street clothes and walked the streets in Zurich and some of the other cities of Switzerland and even other cities of Europe. There was the Humo case in Spain where the Humites kept coming back over and over again to Spanish scientists. At one time, the Humites told the Spanish contactees that they had delegations or study groups in, 54 nations on the planet here, and that they traveled our airliners going from one group to another. They masqueraded as Danish doctors because they looked more like Danes than any others. They were a little tall and they had high foreheads. They had elaborate forging facilities of their own. They could make anything they wanted, and they manufactured their own forged documents, mostly Danish, and traveled the airlines. They acquired money by selling gold, which they brought. Some of these cases are quite elaborate and quite complex. Those are the humans that look so much like us they can mix with us. There may even be one sitting in the auditorium down here. In the case of the Humites in Spain, they had a big congress like this in Madrid, and the Humites said they had 2 members sitting in the audience the whole time, attended all of the sessions, that those Humites recorded everything that was said and done, and it was forwarded back to the home planet of Humo.
I guess a lot of people also talk about how there might be a possibility that we were seeded from aliens.
Well, I hear those arguments that we may represent one species type that did some seeding here. There was an extraterrestrial group one time that told a contactee that our creationist theory and our evolutionist theories are equally false, that we should be thinking of a migrationist theory, that we migrated here from elsewhere or were brought here, that there was no sudden creation and no transition from an animal stage.
And you went into can you go quickly into the different major types of aliens that there are?
Oh gosh.
Like maybe 6 or 7? I'm sure there's many.
Yeah, there's humans like us. There was a study done in 1979 by MUFON, another study done in Canada by CUFOR about the same time, where they collected all of the known cases of alien contact with Earth humans and documented the information statistically and discovered that about 1/3 of the visitors were humans like us, placental animals. Another major part, another third, was what we call grays today. They are non-human species types of a different class. There are some basic characteristics that differentiate us. They do not have any hair follicles in the skin, for instance. They grow no hair on their bodies. They have no melanin in the skin, so they are of a different coloration. They Most of them have no gastrointestinal system. They take their alimentation. It's absorbed through tissues in the mouth a different way. They have a different blood chemistry. I don't know what we could call them. They're just an other species type. Well, apart from the third made up by humans and another third made up by Grays, the third the study was made up of all of the other types, which included amphibioids, sauroids, ovioids, insectoids, almost every kind of life, creature life that you can imagine has someplace produced an evolved, rational, conscious species that has produced a technology and can travel in space and come here. And we can't go there.
Okay. And how do you think the government is involved in all this? I mean, especially nowadays, because I know it has changed and people...
Well, the government, when you speak of the government, you're speaking in a general sense of the government elected by the people. That's one thing. And the popularly elected people probably have very little to do with what's going on. The people that sit on the secrets are self-appointed experts that have found themselves in a position to create and maintain the secrecy, which gives them a certain control, a certain power that they do exercise. And they're the ones that control public access to such information, which is very little. They're the ones that put out the disinformation programs to keep it all in the loony bin and to dissuade the public interest.
What would be your, if you were to summarize, this is the last question, where we would like to see this information going and where you see it going?
The information that comes out?
Yeah.
I would like to see it made more public. Our institutions, the educational institutions, are very capable of analyzing what data is available. If all of the data that's been collected and made available, including crash residue, bodies, and everything else, and was studied by the appropriate medical and scientific and physical universities, we would have solved some of the problems a long time ago. We are losing ground in our attempts to understand the problem by the close compartmentalization and separation of the knowledge and the residue from the public at large. And I think that's bad. I think it's retarding our development.
A lot of it is fear-based, I guess, too.
Mostly fear-based.
Okay.